Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's effective note-taking workshop. My name is Cynthia, one of the instructors with Iris Reading. Happy to see you in the audience today. Sorry, I think I have a little bit of an echo, but I hope that you're able to hear me clear enough this morning. We're talking about note-taking today. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me via email. I will share that email in the chat at the end of the presentation. Any observations, anything like that, you're more than welcome to contribute into the conversation, whether that be in the chat or you comment on the video later on. Also, let me know if you'd like to get a conversation going down in the chat. What your current techniques are for taking notes, whether you kind of just do wild west and you write everything down and figure it out later, or you have a system in place before you actually take your notes. So you prepare before class, you make a plan, you have some kind of system that you use before you actually take your notes, right? Which is great. That means you're pretty much ahead of the game. So let us know down in the comments below what you do, why you do that, more importantly. And for those of you in the audience that are maybe having a hard time figuring out what kind of note-taking method works for you, that is okay. That is why we are here today with this workshop. Iris Reading is based out of Chicago. I am broadcasting live out of Chicago as well. Lots of things going on in the city today. Let us know also if you've ever taken a workshop with us. Have you ever even heard of us in the past? We'd love to see who we have in the audience who is joining the Iris Reading Speed Reading family. And yes, we are actually known for our speed reading workshop. That workshop has been taught in over 100 cities around the world. And we're very proud of that content. So if you would like to be a little bit more of a productive reader, I know that maybe the title speed reading kind of raises eyebrows and you're like, I don't know. Definitely check it out. Give us a chance. We have many wonderful reviews on that workshop specifically. And we also give a memory techniques workshop, which is my favorite one to teach. So before we get into all of that, I want to share our social media. If you do enjoy today's presentation, you are more than welcome to join us on Instagram, on Facebook. You are obviously watching us on YouTube, and we also have a TikTok that I need to add on here. Our Instagram will mainly be, if you just want to maybe get a little idea of what we post on there, random trivia, things that we have discovered reading or speed reading. Our YouTube, we usually will post this kind of workshop. We're working on beefing up our content, adding more there. So please, if you want to see what's coming, I know we're 5 months into 2023, almost 6, but we have a lot of new things cooking here at Iris Reading. So definitely check out and hit the subscribe button if you enjoy it. On Facebook, we do have our official business page on there, but more importantly, my favorite is our book club that we have on there, and we discuss all things related to reading and learning. This morning our post was about how this is actually on the news right now in Chicago, how there are many migrants that are coming to Chicago, and they are being housed in community colleges around the city. And one of these colleges, the library, the school's central library, is actually where the migrants will be housed. So the question of the morning was, what would you do what would you suggest the library do with these books? Because they will be inaccessible for the community members as well as for the students that are attending this college. So what would be your recommendation with these books? Should they be given out? Should they be given, what would you do with them? Would you donate them to another organization? Curious to see what your ideas, what your thoughts are on that. If you want to join that conversation, please check it out. Again, it is on our Instagram book club called Book Lovers Assemble. And I think this morning's post, it hasn't gone up yet. In about 45 minutes, it'll be on our Instagram. We posted a fun fact about Cookie Monster. Now, I won't spoil that for you, but definitely check that out in about 45 minutes or so. Now, back into note taking, the reason we take notes is to help us remember, right? We don't write things down for fun. It's not necessarily an easy thing to write, especially for long periods of time. It's a matter of finding the right pen, the right kind of paper, the right position to sit on a desk so you can write comfortably. It takes a lot for you to take notes, right? But sometimes we forget the most important thing, which is that we take them to help us remember. We're not taking them because this is some kind of torture that our teacher is trying to impose on us. This is for our benefit. It's for us to remember for the exam later, for a meeting later. It's very important, okay? But we kind of maybe just, we lose focus on why we're doing that, and that is sometimes translated in how we take notes, which is sometimes looking like a very scary mess, like a word vomit almost. So a few things that we're going to cover today, some different note-taking methods. If you are taking notes, pen and paper across the page, and you're writing maybe in full sentences, this is something you may have never heard of before. Think about how you think, and then think about how you take your notes, because they are related. We can say they're cousins. Do you think in full sentences? If you do, then it makes sense to take your notes in a linear fashion. If you don't if you don't think in full sentences, so maybe you think in pictures, or maybe you think in groups of words like phrases, or maybe one word, right? Why would we then be taking notes in full sentences if that is not necessarily how we think, right? Probably never thought about that before. So we'll touch a little bit more on the importance of finding a particular method that works for you. We'll talk about the read and recall exercise as well. So read and recall is really, really good when we are maybe just reading something that we don't really like, okay? And that happens from time to time. We read things and we have no choice or say as to if we can read it or not. We have no choice, right? So I'm a student. I have to read through a lot of things that are not my favorite flavor, but you know, it is what it is. So read and recall can help us pay attention there. It's almost like an accountability partner. We'll talk about some digital tools as well. So if you are maybe more on the tech savvy side and you would rather stay away from papyrus and feather or pen and paper, and you want to just use everything on your laptop, we've found a few programs that have actually worked really well for us here at Iris Reading. We've tested it out. And we'll share that with you all. And our final point, when to review notes. So it's not just a matter of taking good notes, it's a matter of spacing out the timing as to when we review them, because that is another very important component. When you're taking your notes, you don't just make the note, the beautiful manifesto of notes, and then leave it there, right? Osmosis doesn't necessarily work with us. So how often should we be reviewing them? Have you ever even thought about the science behind how important this actually is? So this is everything that we'll be talking about today. If you have any questions, again, you're more than welcome to reach out to me. My email is cynthia@irisreading.com. Very short email, easy to remember. If anything, you can always check out the website, irisreading.com, and reach out to us through there. Now, we said that we take our notes because we want to remember, right? So let's talk a little bit about memory before we tap into the note-taking portion. It is true that the more you do something, the higher and the longer the chances are of that staying in your memory, right? That makes perfect sense, 100%. The problem is that sometimes we think that doing something 50,000 times means it will be seared into our memory. And that's not necessarily how it works. So repetition, as the quote goes, is the mother of learning, but not what is called rote repetition. And that is spelled R-O-T-E. So that's rote repetition. Now, this type of repetition is what I call mindless repetition, where you just read through the same thing 10 times, 20 times. And some people think that that is studying, or some people think that that is something that will impact their memory, but it isn't. Okay. Here's something interesting. Have you ever maybe YouTube this? Maybe after today's video, or after today's class, you check out like just go on YouTube or stay on YouTube and type in like Star Spangled Banner fails, or like artists failing to sing the Star Spangled Banner. So here in the US, every morning from grades like kindergarten to 8th grade, there's the Pledge of Allegiance, right? And then you sing a song. And so that's what you do every day for about 8-9 years. So you would think that someone that grew up in the US would have that committed to memory. And there are all of these videos of American-born artists that grew up doing this as well. And for some reason, it's in front of a sporting event, in front of thousands of people, like at the Super Bowl, for example, or a baseball game, they forget the words to these songs, to these national songs. And it's pretty embarrassing to watch. I can only imagine how it feels in the moment. But the point is, again, that just because you're doing something many times, it doesn't mean that it's going to stay in your memory effectively. Maybe certain components will stay, maybe the overall shape of what you're reviewing will stay. Like, when you try to sing along with a song you've heard many times, and you kind of like, you kind of know what word is coming, you're not exactly sure though, so you kind of like, when you're singing, that happens sometimes, right? You don't know the words, and some of us, we have to actually read through the lyrics to then have it memorized correctly. So repetition, we don't want to just get hooked up on doing the same thing 100 times, okay? We want to use some strategy, some technique to make sure that it stays effectively. Now, how do we read and remember with notes? Okay, so maybe we're annotating for class, we're preparing for class. We do have an Iris method here at Iris Reading, and I always get asked, am I Iris? No, I am Cynthia. Iris was here before me. Actually, I don't even know who Iris is. I gotta ask our founder and CEO. Did he meet a speed reading goddess named Iris? I'm not sure, but the I is for inspecting. And we talk about this in our speed reading workshop, inspecting and reading. So I won't spoil it for you. If you want to check out that speed reading class, definitely check it out. But we essentially talk about getting the gist of what you're reading before you actually read it. So look at the headings, look at the subheadings, right? Look at the pictures, look at the captions. How long is this chapter? How long is this book that you need to read, right? Do you have enough time to read it? Have you drank enough coffee to get through it? I should probably stay away from coffee. But the point is, inspecting can help you prepare, right? Preparation is very important, and unfortunately, it seems to be one of the things that students were like, forget it, I'm just gonna wing it, right? And then we pay the consequences later. So let's not do that, and let's just take maybe 10 minutes to inspect whatever you need to read before you read it. Again, you're more than welcome to check out that speed reading workshop at our website, irisreading.com. You inspect, and then you decide if you want to read something or not, okay? Maybe your professor says, hey, this is really important, and when you inspect it, you're like, this has nothing to do with anything, so I'm not going to read it, right? That happens. It happens to me. I am also a student, and it feels like I get so many emails with publications that my professor deems important, and when I look through it, I'm like, I am not interested in this. This has nothing to do with me, with this major. I don't even know why you're sending me this, right? The next step in the IRIS method is to inquire. And we just created a brand new workshop that dives a little deeper into the subject of asking questions. Because sometimes we don't know what questions we should be asking, right? I always like to share that when I was in nursing school a long time ago, I was so confused. I had no idea what was happening. It felt like nursing school was being held in another language. And I'm trilingual, and I was like, what's happening here? I don't understand any of this, right? Now I can look back and say, well, it was just a totally different field that I had to really just immerse myself in to completely understand. But in the moment, I had no idea what questions I should be asking. And so if that is something you struggle with, again, we did launch in March of this year comprehension strategies, and it's essentially talking about 6 dimensions to better comprehend a specific subject. So very, very popular. We've gotten a lot of very good response from that. If you, again, are struggling, definitely check that out. Now, in the IRIS method, we want you to ask all the questions, and ideally, we want you to answer all of your questions as well. Because if you can't answer them, then you shouldn't move on to the final step, which is either note-taking or memorizing the information. Okay, so this is our IRIS method. Most of us will probably read and then we'll try to memorize it, and then later we'll try to understand it, and it doesn't always make sense, right? So the IRIS method makes it very clear, 4 basic steps for you to follow when trying to get through a specific subject. So let us now talk about some strategies to enhance our recall, some note-taking strategies. And this is just a fancy way of saying some note-taking strategies to help you remember, which is the point of today's presentation. So you notice we've got this this page here that is highlighted. Yeah, you know, this happens to students from time to time. If you've ever bought a used college textbook and you've peeked into this is really scary, right? And sometimes students think, and I'm guilty of this once upon a time, that the more you highlight, miraculously, that meant I was paying attention, and I wasn't. So let's talk about the best practices for highlighting and underlining, okay? We have really researched this subject in depth because there seems to be just a fascination with the highlighters, and I was actually thinking about writing my dissertation on highlighters specifically. I'm very interested in the color and why people are so drawn to these very colorful highlighters when reading, more so than just underlining. But anyway, we did our research, and it turns out that there are 2 not so good things about reading and highlighting at the same time. Now, one of them is that when you read and you highlight at the same time, it's actually seen to be a form of passive note taking or passive reading, I'm sorry. And when we're talking about passive reading, it means that your brain is actually not paying attention to the text. So researchers did find that when students read and highlight, their attention, their comprehension, everything goes down. It may feel, because you have some positive reinforcement with the brightness on the page, that you are paying attention, but you actually most times are not. And the second risk is that when you read and highlight, you run the risk of reading things or highlighting things, I'm sorry, that are not important and that you don't have to spend so much time on. Now, how do you know what's important to highlight and what is not if you haven't made it through the end of the paragraph or the end of the section before you actually decide to highlight? Right? Most of us will probably read and highlight at the same time, and that is how we get pages that look like this. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to read and highlight at the same time. There are 2 big risks there. Now, when it comes to taking notes, you know, we'd like to say we have a magical remedy for this, but will it reintroduce the IRIS method here? Because this is really important to taking the best notes you can possibly take. So when you inspect something, right back at the top, when you inspect something and you see these are the vocabulary words, these are the headings, these are the overall themes that I'm finding in this chapter, that can help prime your brain to know what needs to be written down and what doesn't. Because you see, a lot of students will go to class and they won't have any preparation beforehand. They won't be ready to ask questions, which means they're writing things they don't understand, which means in turn they're taking these notes home and they're reviewing things that they don't understand. And you're stuck in this endless cycle of confusion. So we don't want you to do that. We want you to prep before class so that in class you can ask the questions, write down the answers to those questions, and then take home what makes sense to you so that you can then memorize it for the exam. Okay, so it does take preparation beforehand. We do want you to inspect. Again, if you want to know a little bit more about that speed reading workshop, please check it out on our website, irisreading.com. So again, preparation is key. If you take anything away from today's presentation, remember preparation is key for taking the best notes possible. Oh, there's our IRIS method. All right, and some individuals have asked if what is better, whether it be handwritten notes or digital notes. Now, we won't answer that because that pretty much is contingent on how you think, right? But let's talk about this for a second. Think about if you're typing something out versus writing something out. Do you really have to think about it when you're typing? It's almost automatic, right? You don't even have to worry about pausing for a second. Most people, if you are typing right now while I'm speaking, you have no problem keeping up with what I'm saying, but it's not the case when you're writing things down, right? When you're writing things down, you actually have to stop and say, what did she say, right? And then you write what you're writing, right? Or what you want to write down. So interestingly enough, we talked about this at the beginning, how repetition is important for your memory, right? So handwriting your notes actually is a good way to enforce that repetition or to do a rep, right? So think about that. Just keep that in mind. I'm not saying you shouldn't type your notes. I'm not saying you should only write your notes out by hand, but I am saying that if you are having a hard time with your typed notes, then maybe switching over to a handwriting method may work for you. Okay, just give it a go and see what happens. Now, this is also kind of scary to look at because it's really just it's not cool to look at. Remember, here's another takeaway for today's workshop. It's not just about taking all the notes, it's about making it easy to understand, okay? And this is not easy to understand. It looks like whoever was trying to write these notes, maybe they thought by using 2 different colors and a line dividing the page and some kind of outlining-ish system, it would maybe organize their notes. It didn't. It looks just as scary. So let's talk about a few templates that we can potentially use. Okay, it looks like this person tried to use an outline. Again, don't forget what a basic outline looks like. Let's keep it brief. Let's keep it concise. Let's keep it neat, more importantly. Because again, if you've got something that looks like this is already inducing anxiety in myself. I can only imagine in someone that's struggling to take notes. So let's not do that. And let's just make sure that when we are outlining, or if we are using an outline, for example, we're keeping these notes nice and brief. We're getting the key points written down, and it's as legible as well. Another very popular note-taking template is using the sketch notes method. And now some people may say, well, I'm not in kindergarten, so I'm not going to do that. But keep in mind that most of us do think in pictures. So if we think in pictures, then why not take notes in pictures? Because again, it's easier to remember, right? Like if I say, for example, the word mango, or if I say parakeet, or if I say Tesla, what do you see in your brain? Do you see the word mango, or do you see an actual mango, right? Most of us probably see the actual mango, or the Tesla symbol, or an actual Tesla, right? Or a beautiful parakeet. So we think in pictures, most of us. So taking our notes sketched out like this is not a bad idea. Obviously, you don't have to be an artist, because I clearly am not. But you know, it's a nice way to write your notes out. It's nice and organized. You've got the headings on here as well. You don't have to get fancy color pencils and crayons and markers or glitter unless you want to, but you don't have to. right? This is a nice way to help you, again, remember. So keep that in mind. Again, maybe you just need to change up the technique of how you're taking these notes. My favorite way to take notes, however, and I love mind map. I really do love mind mapping, because it actually mimics the way you think. And my major right now, I am going for a PhD in educational psychology. So how we think and how we learn is very, very important to me. And it's actually made me kind of tap into how I learn and think and how I can interpret that when teaching not only these workshops, but also creating other workshops here at Iris Reading, because it sometimes feels like some students, if you don't fit the mold, especially in the public school system, if you don't fit the mold, but maybe you don't fit in with the other, there's 25 students in the class and they all think the same way, what happens to the other 5 that are falling behind? Is it that maybe they require extra assistance, or is it maybe just that they think in a different way? Right? And they learn in a different way. So those are one of the challenges, right, that comes from the public school system. But the point being in touch with how you think is very important, because this is actually interpreted with this mind mapping. So mind mapping is almost like a 2-for-1 special, where you are writing your notes out, which is what we're talking about, but you're also working through the subject so that you can better understand it. If, for example, I was to share something brand new with you, maybe you've never heard of this before, in the beginning, you might be like, what? It doesn't make any sense. Maybe later on, while washing dishes or going on a walk or doing something else, your brain starts to kind of ruminate on what maybe I shared with you, and then you're like, well, that kind of makes sense if this is the case or that is the case. So it's almost like a thought process, right? Because most of us don't automatically understand everything we hear and learn at the same time. Some of us, it takes a little longer, right? So, and that's the beauty of mind mapping, is that you're kind of working, you're physically working through that, so that you can get to the core of the subject and you can understand it from these different dimensions. So if you maybe want to test this method out, you can always do pen and paper, that's fine. We like XMind.net. It's a free app that you can use. On your computer, you can just download it. You don't have to like sign up. You can just use the free version, the free public version, and we've never had a problem with it ever. No ads, nothing annoying like that. You do have to download it though, that's the only thing. If you don't want to download anything, mindmeister.com is a really good website as well. It is free, and you can, this is what I enjoy, you can actually go through other people's mind maps. And so maybe if they've made it public and you're researching something in the field of neurology, for example, you type in a keyword, it'll pop up all of the mind maps that have that word that you searched for. So if maybe you're trying to understand the connection between A and B and you're not necessarily getting it, maybe going through someone else's mind map might help you better understand. So it's a great resource for students. Cornell Notes, this is something that is fairly known. I have actually made a little adjustment when I use the Cornell Note method, only because, so we have our standard title, keyword question, main note right here in the middle, and then the summary at the bottom. I will usually include a section at the bottom right here for examples, just because, again, I know that I can have everything written out beautifully, but if I don't have an example kind of proving everything I wrote out, then it just makes me not feel too great. So, some of us need that extra security. I need it. So I just made a little adjustment on there for examples. Now, monetary notes is my second favorite note-taking method, okay? And here, let me show you how it works. So we're kind of tapping into digital forms of taking notes right now. You've got your subject at the top, so we're using spreadsheets at this point. You've got the chapter, the page number, the rating, and the note itself. So throughout the semester, you're writing your notes out like this, right? And then when it's time for the semester exam or the final exam, well, most people are running around like freaking out because they have no idea what's going to be on the exam. You have kept track of everything you have written down. So hundreds are examples of notes that are most important. 50s are examples of notes that are important, and 20s are examples of notes that are important, but they're least important. Okay, so again, throughout the semester, you're tagging each of your notes, and then if you are familiar with using spreadsheets, this is a very simple function. You don't have to be a spreadsheet wizard to do this. You can just organize your columns from ascending to descending or descending to ascending, meaning that your hundreds will be at the top, your 50s in the middle, and your 20s at the bottom. Okay, so you don't have to worry about losing any notes or anything unless you lose your computer. And even if that, it's all saved on Google Sheets, so you're good to go. Okay. Evernote is great as well. It has a beautiful function where if you have the app on your cell phone as well as the account on your laptop, everything will automatically synchronize. So if you're maybe a commuter and your commute is maybe like an hour, 45 minutes, something like that, and you want to make a little more best use of your time, here in Chicago, it's a very bad idea to pull out a MacBook on the bus. But if you have your cell phone, instead of maybe playing Candy Crush, you can go over your notes that have automatically synchronized in the Evernote app. So give it a go, give that a try. Here's our iris method one more time. I want to make sure this stays with you forever. Don't forget, we want you to inspect, read, inquire, and then find a method of storing that works for you. But what happens when then we are having a hard time paying attention or concentrating? Remember, we said we might have a subject and it's just not one of our favorite flavors. So what do we do there? We have the read and recall exercise that we've discovered. And this read and recall exercise is really good because it's almost like an accountability partner. So if you don't have a classmate or a colleague that's pushing you to pay attention, then, you're kind of doomed, right? But if you've got the read and recall exercise down, then you're good. You don't have to worry about anything. So nice thing about read and recall, at the end of each paragraph, you take a note, okay? So that note is essentially summarizing what you just read, okay? And the summary can be rather brief. It's just proving to yourself that you paid attention and you got some key takeaways, okay? So that's pretty much how you get through the entire section. And we're gonna test this out right now with a book by Bill Bryson, A Really Short History of Nearly Everything, the wonderful book about basically all of it. Okay, so we'll use this read and recall exercise. I will disable my webcam for this exercise, and I will also time you. I'll give you a minute and 30 seconds to read, and then you don't have to send the message to me. You can, if you'd like, to just text it to yourself or write it down, just kind of see how this method works for you, if you feel that it will work for you or not. I'll give you a minute and 30. Now keep in mind, in the future, if you do this, you don't have to time yourself. It's just I have to keep today's presentation under an hour. Okay, so in the future, you do not have to time yourself. Here we go, everyone. We're going to test this out a few times, starting with the intro. And we're going to read, and at the end of each paragraph, we're going to write something down, okay? So here we go. First one, introduction. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, very good. Let's try with chapter 1, how to build a universe. Same thing, okay? Here we go. 3, 2, 1, go. All right, that was chapter 1. We're going to do this 2 more times, okay? Chapter 2, welcome to the solar system. Here we go. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, and the final one, we'll do chapter 3, the Reverend Evans universe. Go ahead and start. All right, very good. We won't do the final ones. It's a lot of drills for this morning, but I'm curious as to what your thoughts are with this exercise. Again, we're not saying you need to do this all the time, but maybe when you have a hard time paying attention, this might be something that helps, okay? Now, final point that we'll talk about the science behind why we forget things. And interestingly enough, we have actually discovered through research that other people have done, that most people feel like they're paying attention when they actually are not. And it's pretty much related to the fact that we are all hyperstimulated by the screens and the TikTok and the cell phone and everything, right? And so it can create this ambiance in the brain where it's like, it feels like it's paying attention, but it actually isn't, not always. Okay, and so that's why sometimes people say, well, I have a terrible memory because I'm pretty sure I was paying attention. And unless you are actually suffering from a disorder that impairs your memory, that's actually not true. So that's something to keep in mind. So there is such a thing as the forgetting curve, which essentially means as soon as you learn something, you start to forget it almost immediately. Okay, if that is the case, then when should we then review our notes? And we have actually uncovered a mathematical approach to memory, and that is keeping in mind this forgetting curve, how we forget almost immediately, or we start forgetting almost immediately, the Fibonacci sequence. Okay, so Fibonacci is very good because, for one, you don't have to worry about memorizing anything. You just have to remember these last two numbers here. So 1 + 1 is 2. 1 + 2 is 3, 2 + 3 is 5, 3 + 5 is 8, and so on and so forth, okay? So you keep on going, and how do we then apply this to memory? Well, we are now going to space out the repetition using these Fibonacci numbers. So let's say, hypothetically, you learned something today at noon. If you are reviewing it using the Fibonacci review periods, 1 hour later you review, 2 hours later, 3, 5, 8, 13 hours later. Okay, so you've got, very important to notice this gap in the middle right here. Most students will think that no breaks are necessary. They just want to do like a study session, like a study marathon for 3 or 5 hours and not get a break. And that's actually not good, because if you think about athletes or somebody that is training maybe for like the Ironman or the Olympics or something like that, you might think, okay, well, I have to work out like 16, 20, 24 hours a day, and that's not healthy, right? So although the brain is not a muscle, you can treat it like a muscle, okay? And that's why we want to get those breaks in the middle right there. Now, you can do this on an hourly basis. You can do this on a daily basis, right? You can do it on a monthly basis, or you could do it on a minute-by-minute basis as well. So 1 minute later, after you learn something, then 2, then 3, then 5, then 8, and so on and so forth. Okay, so keep that in mind. So that is spaced repetition, and if you combine that with something called retrieval practice, then you are going to be a memory rock star. Now, retrieval practice is the practice of pulling information from your brain and then putting it back. And something important to note as well is that you should also be reviewing things that you already know. Okay, some people think I don't have to review anything I know already because that's already in my memory, and that's not exactly how things work, right? If you maybe grew up speaking a language and then you stop speaking that language for a couple of years, you do forget. So we want you to practice, and that is why Quizlet, or specifically flashcards, are a great way to kind of test what you have. Pulls it from your memory and then puts it back, whether it's something you're trying to learn or it's something you think you know very, very well. Now, Quizlet is the modern take on flashcards because you don't have to physically make these. You can have it on your cell phone. It is animated. It is very nice colors, right? There are many subjects on here, but one of the things that we most appreciate about Quizlet is this corner at the top right where it says game-based learning, and that's actually scientific term for this is a gamification, or gamifying your learning experience. And what this means is that researchers have found that individuals that turn the reviewing of information into a game, whether it's a game they make or whether it's a game they play here on Quizlet or on any other application that has game-based learning, students are actually seen to do better and remember for longer than students that approach their reading and learning annoyed, not in the mood, not wanting to learn, right? So attitude is also very important. And who doesn't like to play a game on their phone, right? So this is really good for memory as well. And one of the main reasons why we appreciate the Quizlet application. With that, that wraps up today's presentation. So thank you all for coming. Please check out our social media if you enjoyed today's presentation. Again, you may be watching this on YouTube, on Instagram. Don't forget our Facebook, and we are also on TikTok as well under the handle iris.reading. Now, if you would like to take any of the courses that we have on our website, you can find those at irisreading.com, and we have a 30% off discount code if you're interested. So you can use the code BOOKLOVERS, all lowercase, for 30% off. If you would like the slides to today's presentation or maybe a summary sheet, you can reach out to me at cynthia@irisreading.com, and I can get that to you, as well as any questions that you may have as well. So thank you all once again for coming, and I hope to see you in a future session. Thanks, everyone, and happy note-taking.